How I Lost Everything in 24 Hours, From a Perfect Life to Rock Bottom, My Heartbreaking Journey of Betrayal, Financial Ruin, and Finding Hope Again. Hey Reddit, it's Gaben here. Never thought I'd end up spilling my guts on the internet, but life's got a funny way of fucking you over. So here's my story about how I lost everything in just 24 hours. Grab a drink or whatever, because this ride is going to be bumpy as hell. My life was damn near perfect. I mean, I was living the kind of dream people fantasize about. I had a smoking hot fiancée named Sarah. We'd been together for 5 years, and she was everything to me. Seriously, this woman was the whole package. Gorgeous, smart, funny, and she made one hell of a lasagna. We lived in a sleek condo in downtown San Francisco. Picture this, waking up every morning to the smell of freshly brewed coffee, the city skyline outside your window, and Sarah's beautiful smile greeting you. Yeah, it was that good. Work was another sweet part of my life. I was a software engineer at one of the top tech companies in the city. I'm talking 6-figure salary, insane perks, and a team that felt more like family than coworkers. My boss, Kevin, was a total bro. He'd mentored me from day one, and we'd become good friends over the years. We'd often grab drinks after work, sharing laughs and war stories from the trenches of tech. Hell, he even got me the job in the first place. Speaking of friends, I had the best group anyone could ask for. We'd known each other since college, a bunch of nerds who'd stuck together through thick and thin. Every Friday night was sacred. We'd either hit up the local bars or have epic game nights at one of our places. Life was this endless cycle of joy, laughter, and stability. You know how people say, if it seems too good to be true, it probably is? Well, I was about to learn that lesson the hard way. The day my life imploded started like any other. I woke up, kissed Sarah good morning, and headed to the office. We had a massive project coming up, and everyone was on edge. But not me. I'd done my homework, and I was ready to knock it out of the park. Around 10 a.m., Sarah called. She sounded a bit off, but she brushed it off, saying she just wanted to hear my voice. It was sweet, and I didn't think much of it. In hindsight, that was the first fucking red flag waving right in my face. Lunch rolled around, and Kevin and I decided to grab some burgers from this food truck we loved. As we waited in line, I noticed he seemed unusually tense. Kevin was usually the most laid-back guy in the room, so this was weird. "Hey man, you good?" I asked, trying to lighten the mood. "Yeah, just some shit going on at home," he replied, his eyes darting around like he was looking for an escape route. I didn't press further. Kevin wasn't the type to spill personal stuff easily, and I figured he'd tell me when he was ready. The rest of the day flew by. By 5 p.m., I was ready to head home and unwind. Sarah had texted me earlier saying she was cooking a special dinner. My mouth watered just thinking about her famous lasagna. I walked into our condo, and the aroma of garlic and herbs hit me like a warm hug. Sarah was bustling around the kitchen, looking as gorgeous as ever. For a moment, everything felt perfect again. We had dinner, laughed about old times, and made plans for the weekend. I thought I'd dodged whatever weird vibe I'd picked up earlier. Boy, was I wrong. After dinner, Sarah sat me down on the couch. Her face was pale, and her hands were trembling. "Gaben, we need to talk," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. My heart sank. I knew this tone. It was the prelude to bad news. "I've been seeing someone else," she confessed, tears streaming down her face. "It's been going on for a few months. I'm so sorry." My world shattered. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "Who?" I managed to choke out, my voice raw with emotion. "It's Kevin," she admitted, looking away. "It started when you were working late on that project. I don't know how it happened, but it did." Rage, hurt, and disbelief washed over me in waves. My fiancé and my best friend. The betrayal was unfathomable. I stood up, my legs shaking, and stormed out of the apartment. I couldn't even look at her. I drove around aimlessly, my mind racing. How could they do this to me? I ended up at a bar, drowning my sorrows in whiskey. The more I drank, the angrier I got. I decided I needed to confront Kevin. I dialed his number, and to my surprise, he picked up. "Gaben, I'm so sorry," he started, but I cut him off. "Fuck you, Kevin. How could you do this to me?" I yelled, drawing the attention of everyone in the bar. "You were supposed to be my friend." He tried to explain, but I wasn't having any of it. I hung up and stumbled out of the bar. I needed to get away from everything and everyone. I spent that night in a shitty motel room, the kind that smells like bleach and desperation. My head was spinning, both from the whiskey and the betrayal. How could my perfect life come crashing down so fast? I barely slept, tossing and turning, haunted by images of Sarah and Kevin together. Every time I closed my eyes, it felt like a dagger twisting deeper into my chest. Morning came too soon. I dragged myself out of bed, my head pounding. I knew I couldn't go home. Not yet. The thought of facing Sarah made me sick to my stomach. I needed to clear my head and figure out what the hell I was going to do. I called in sick to work, telling my boss I'd caught some nasty bug. So, he sounded worried, but didn't press for details. I didn't have the energy to deal with anyone right now. I decided to take a drive, hoping the open road would help me think. I ended up at a secluded beach, the kind of place we'd go to escape the city and find some peace. Ironic, right? Sitting on the sand, I watched the waves crash against the shore, trying to make sense of the chaos in my head. My phone buzzed constantly with calls and texts from Sarah and Kevin, but I ignored them. I wasn't ready to face either of them. By noon, I felt a little more grounded. I decided to call my best friend from college, Mike. He'd always been my rock, the one person I could count on no matter what. When he picked up, I could barely hold back the tears. "Gaben? What's wrong, man?" he asked, concern lacing his voice. "It's Sarah and Kevin," I choked out. "They've been fucking each other behind my back." "Those fucking bastards!" Mike exploded. "I'm coming over. Where are you?" I gave him the address of the beach, and within an hour, he was there, bringing a six-pack and a shitload of sympathy. We sat on the sand, drinking and talking. I poured out everything, from the weird vibes at work to Sarah's confession. Mike listened, his face a mask of anger and disbelief. "Fuck them, man," he said, handing me another beer. "You deserve better than this shit." His words were a balm to my wounded soul. We spent the rest of the afternoon there, just talking and drinking. For a moment, I felt like things might be okay. As the sun began to set, Mike convinced me to crash at his place for a few days. I agreed, knowing I couldn't keep hiding forever. We packed up and headed back to his apartment. It was a small, cozy place filled with the comforting clutter of someone who lives alone but isn't lonely. It felt like a safe haven, a place where I could start to piece myself back together. The next few days were a blur. I stayed in bed most of the time, drifting in and out of sleep. Mike kept bringing me food and checking in on me, but I felt like I was in a fog. I couldn't shake the image of Sarah and Kevin. The betrayal seared into my brain. On the third day, I finally forced myself to get up and face the world. I called my boss again, telling him I needed a few more days off. He was understanding, but I could hear the concern in his voice. I knew I couldn't avoid work forever. I decided to head back to my condo, hoping Sarah had moved out. As I approached the building, my stomach churned with anxiety. I took a deep breath and stepped inside, bracing myself for whatever lay ahead. To my surprise, the place was empty. Sarah had left a note on the kitchen counter, along with her key. "I'm so sorry," it read. "I know I've hurt you deeply. I'm staying with a friend for now. Please take care of yourself." Sarah were... I crumpled the note and threw it in the trash. I didn't need her fucking pity. I spent the rest of the day packing up her things, stuffing them into boxes and leaving them by the door. I wanted every trace of her gone. With the condo finally cleared of her presence, I tried to settle back into some semblance of normalcy. But the calm was short-lived. The next blow came out of nowhere, hitting me like a freight train. One morning, I received a call from my bank. The automated message was urgent, warning of unusual activity on my account. My heart pounded as I logged in to check. To my horror, I saw that my savings had been wiped out. Every last fucking penny was gone. Panic set in as I called the bank, demanding answers. The rep on the other end was sympathetic but unhelpful. It seemed my account had been hacked and they were investigating. I felt sick to my stomach. How could this be happening? In a daze, I called my financial advisor. He confirmed the worst. My accounts had been compromised, and my investments were also at risk. I was broke. Completely and utterly broke. I couldn't fucking believe it. In the span of 24 hours, I had lost my fiancée, my best friend, and all my money. It felt like the universe was conspiring against me. I was spiraling, barely holding on. I spent the next few days in a haze, trying to figure out what to do. I met with lawyers, financial advisors, and the police, but progress was slow. The stress was unbearable. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't think. I started avoiding everyone, even Mike. I didn't want to burden him with my shit anymore. I felt like a ghost, drifting through my days without purpose. The only thing that kept me going was the hope that, somehow, things would get better. But that hope was fading fast. One day, as I was walking aimlessly through the city, I ran into an old friend from work, Jake. We hadn't seen each other in years, but he could tell something was wrong. We grabbed a coffee, and I poured out my heart to him. Jake listened patiently and offered words of encouragement. He reminded me that I was strong and that I had overcome challenges before. He also suggested I see a therapist, something I hadn't considered. I took his advice and started seeing a therapist. It was tough at first, but slowly I began to process my emotions. I also reconnected with my family and other friends who offered their support. The road to recovery was long and painful, but with time I started to rebuild my life. I found a new job, one that wasn't as high paying, but gave me a sense of purpose. I moved to a new city to start fresh. One day I received a call from the bank. They had recovered some of my money. It wasn't everything, but it was a start. I felt a glimmer of hope for the first time in months. Through therapy and the support of my loved ones, I learned to forgive, not for them, but for myself. Holding on to anger and resentment was only hurting me. I cut all ties with Sarah and Kevin and focused on my healing. Now, a year later, I'm in a better place. I've learned the hard way that life can change in an instant, but I've also learned that I'm stronger than I ever knew. I've found new passions, new friends, and a new sense of purpose. This journey has been hell, but it's also shown me the resilience of the human spirit. If you're going through something similar, know that you're not alone and that there is hope, even in the darkest times. I spent the next few days at Mike's place, nursing my wounds and trying to wrap my head around the shitstorm that had become my life. He was a good friend, keeping me company, bringing me meals, and making sure I didn't drown myself in whiskey. But I knew I couldn't hide forever. Eventually, I had to face the music. I decided to go back to my condo and deal with whatever the hell was left of my life. The place felt empty, hollow, like all the joy had been sucked out of it. I walked through the rooms, remembering all the good times Sarah and I had shared there. It was like walking through a graveyard of memories. I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to confront Kevin face to face. I needed answers, and I needed to vent my rage. I arranged to meet him at a bar, the same one we used to frequent after work. It felt fitting to confront him in a place that held so many memories of our friendship. When I arrived, Kevin was already there, nursing a beer. He looked like shit, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. But then I remembered why we were there. I walked over and sat down, my anger barely contained. "Gaben, he started, but I cut him off. "Save it," I snarled. "How long, Kevin? How fucking long?" He looked down at his beer, unable to meet my eyes. "A few months," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "A few fucking months?" I shouted, drawing the attention of everyone in the bar. "You were my best friend, Kevin. How could you do this to me?" "I don't know, man," he said, his voice cracking. "It just happened. I didn't mean for it to go this far." "That's bullshit, and you know it," I spat. "You made a choice, Kevin. Both of you did. You betrayed me." "I'm sorry, Gaben," he said, finally looking me in the eye. "I know I fucked up. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need you to know how sorry I am." "Sorry doesn't cut it," I said, my voice cold. "You and Sarah destroyed my life. Do you have any idea what that feels like?" He didn't answer, just stared at his beer. I couldn't stand to look at him anymore. I stood up, tossing some cash on the table to cover my drink. "We're done, Kevin. Don't ever contact me again." I walked out of the bar, feeling a strange mix of relief and emptiness. I had said what I needed to say, but it didn't make the pain go away. If anything, it made it more real. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. My head throbbed, and my heart felt like it was being squeezed in a vice. I knew I had to keep moving forward, but I didn't know how. I decided to take a drive, hoping the open road would help clear my mind. I ended up at a secluded spot by the ocean, a place where Sarah and I used to go to escape the city. Sitting on the rocks, watching the waves crash against the shore, I let myself feel the full weight of my emotions. Anger, sadness, betrayal, it all came crashing down on me. Crashing down. I pulled out my phone and checked my emails, hoping for some distraction. That's when I saw it. An alert from my bank about unusual activity on my account. My heart raced as I logged in to check. To my horror, I saw that my savings had been wiped out. Every last penny was gone. Panic set in as I called the bank, demanding answers. The rep on the other end was sympathetic but unhelpful. It seemed my account had been hacked, and they were investigating. I felt sick to my stomach. How could this be happening? In a daze, I called my financial advisor. He confirmed the worst. My accounts had been compromised, and my investments were also at risk. I was broke. Completely and utterly broke. I couldn't fucking believe it. In the span of 24 hours, I had lost my fiancée, my best friend, and all my money. It felt like the universe was conspiring against me. I was spiraling, barely holding on. The next few days were a blur of meetings with lawyers, financial advisors, and the police. Progress was slow, and the stress was unbearable. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't think. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Sarah and Kevin, felt the sting of their betrayal all over again. One day, as I was walking aimlessly through the city, I ran into an old friend from work, Jake. We hadn't seen each other in years, but he could tell something was wrong. We grabbed a coffee, and I poured out my heart to him. Jake listened patiently and offered words of encouragement. He reminded me that I was strong and that I had overcome challenges before. He also suggested I see a therapist, something I hadn't considered. I took his advice and started seeing a therapist. It was tough at first, but slowly I began to process my emotions. I also reconnected with my family and other friends who offered their support. The road to recovery was long and painful, but with time I started to rebuild my life. I found a new job, one that wasn't as high paying, but gave me a sense of purpose. I moved to a new city to start fresh. One day, I received a call from the bank. They had recovered some of my money. It wasn't everything, but it was a start. I felt a glimmer of hope for the first time in months. Through therapy and the support of my loved ones, I learned to forgive, not for them, but for myself. Holding on to anger and resentment was only hurting me. I cut all ties with Sarah and Kevin and focused on my healing. Now, a year later, I'm in a better place. I've learned the hard way that life can change in an instant, but I've also learned that I'm stronger than I ever knew. I've found new passions, new friends, and a new sense of purpose. This journey has been hell, but it's also shown me the resilience of the human spirit. If you're going through something similar, know that you're not alone and that there is hope, even in the darkest times. The first few weeks in the new house were surreal. The place was modest, a far cry from the luxurious condo I'd shared with Sarah, but it felt like a fresh start. Jane and I spent weekends painting walls, hanging shelves, and making the space our own. We adopted a rescue dog, a scrappy little mutt named Max, who brought a whirlwind of energy and chaos into our lives. Living with Jane was a new kind of adventure. She was supportive, always knowing when to push me and when to give me space. We had our share of arguments, like when she insisted on painting the kitchen a ridiculous shade of teal. But overall, it was good. Really good. For the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. Work at the startup was a grind, but it was steady. I buried myself in projects, taking on extra freelance gigs to make ends meet. One day, I decided to start a tech blog. It was a way to share my experiences, vent my frustrations, and maybe help a few people avoid the mistakes I'd made. To my surprise, the blog took off. People resonated with my story, my raw honesty about the ups and downs of the tech world. It wasn't long before an old colleague reached out with a job offer. It was tempting. Better pay, more prestige, but I wasn't sure if I was ready to jump back into the corporate meat grinder. The letters to Sarah and Kevin sat on my desk for weeks. I had written them in a fit of anger and pain, pouring out everything I felt. Sending them seemed like opening an old wound, but my therapist thought it might help with closure. One night, fueled by whiskey and Jane's encouragement, I finally mailed them. Their responses were predictably shitty. Sarah's letter was full of apologies and justifications, while Kevin's was defensive and hollow. It hurt like hell, but it was also a release. I tore up their letters and threw them in the trash, deciding that was the last time I'd let their bullshit affect me. Jane and I made an effort to get involved in our new neighborhood. We hosted barbecues, joined a local running club, and even started a community garden project. It felt good to be part of something, to know our neighbors and build connections. I also started a local tech meetup group. It was small at first, just a handful of us sharing ideas over beers, but it grew quickly. We organized workshops, hackathons, and networking events. It gave me a sense of purpose, a way to give back and stay connected to the industry I loved. Life with Jane was full of little milestones. We celebrated our first anniversary with a weekend trip to the mountains, hiking and drinking cheap wine by the campfire. On my birthday, she surprised me with a vintage vinyl player, something I'd always wanted but never indulged in. An unexpected visit from an old friend, Mike, brought new insights. He'd been through his own shitstorm, divorce, job loss, the works. Seeing him thriving, happy, gave me hope. We spent a weekend reminiscing, drinking, and talking about how far we'd come. It was a reminder that life goes on, no matter how fucked up it gets. Despite the progress, I was still haunted by the past. Flashbacks of Sarah and Kevin's betrayal hit me at the worst times. During meetings, in the middle of the night, I'd wake up drenched in sweat, my heart racing. Jane was always there, holding me, whispering that it was going to be okay. I started keeping a journal, jotting down my nightmares, my fears, my anger. It was a way to purge the demons, to get them out of my head and onto the paper. Slowly, it helped. The nightmares became less frequent, the flashbacks less intense. Work was a roller coaster. The startup faced a major setback when a key project failed spectacularly. It wasn't entirely my fault, but I felt the weight of it. The office politics were a nightmare, with everyone pointing fingers and covering their asses. I made my first major mistake, a coding error that cost us a client. The fallout was brutal. Balancing the demands of the job with my freelance work became overwhelming. I was burning the candle at both ends, barely sleeping, constantly on edge. Jane noticed, and it led to our first big fight. She was worried I was pushing myself too hard, and she was right. But admitting that felt like admitting defeat. Our argument wasn't just about work, it was about our future. Jane had big career ambitions, dreams of starting her own business. My struggles were holding her back, and I hated that. We yelled, we cried, and for a moment, I thought we might not make it. We decided to try couples therapy. It felt weird at first, airing our dirty laundry to a stranger, but it helped. We learned to communicate better, to understand each other's needs and fears. It wasn't a quick fix, but it was a step in the right direction. One evening, while out for dinner, we ran into Sarah. My heart dropped into my stomach. She looked the same, but seeing her brought back all the pain and anger. She approached us, her eyes full of regret. "Gaben, I'm so sorry," she started, but I cut her off. "Don't," I said, my voice cold. "We've said everything that needs to be said." Jane squeezed my hand, her presence grounding me. Sarah nodded, tears in her eyes, and walked away. It was a brief encounter, but it reopened old wounds. That night, Jane and I had a long, deep conversation about trust, betrayal, and moving on. It brought us closer, reinforcing our commitment to each other. To clear my head, I took up hiking again. It had always been a passion, but I'd let it fall by the wayside. Now, it became a lifeline. I planned a solo hiking trip, something challenging but manageable. The physical exertion, the solitude, the beauty of nature, it was exactly what I needed. On that hike, I had a lot of time to think. I reflected on my journey, the pain, the growth, the unexpected turns. I came back from that trip with a renewed sense of purpose and a determination to keep moving forward. As things stabilized at work, I found my footing. My performance improved, and I took on more responsibilities. The blog continued to grow, and I started getting speaking invitations at tech conferences. It felt like things were finally falling into place. The idea of starting my own tech startup began to take shape. With the support of my blog followers and some old connections, I launched a small venture focused on cybersecurity. It was risky as hell, but I was passionate about it. The initial reception was positive, and I felt like I was on the right path. Jane and I decided to tackle a new project together, a community garden. It was hard work, but incredibly rewarding. We spent weekends digging, planting, and building. The garden became a gathering place for our neighbors, a place to unwind and connect. The support network we built through the garden was incredible. We made new friends, found mentors, and even inspired a few people to start their own projects. It was a reminder that even in the midst of personal turmoil, you can make a positive impact. Teaching had always been a dream of mine, so when I got the chance to teach a tech course at a local college, I jumped at it. It was fulfilling in a way I hadn't expected. Mentoring young minds, sharing my knowledge and experiences. It was deeply rewarding. Jane's career was also taking off. She got a promotion and started working on bigger projects. We celebrated each other's successes, always making time to recognize the hard work and dedication. Our relationship was stronger than ever, built on mutual support and love. Reconnecting with my family was one of the most challenging but necessary steps in my healing process. There had been a lot of tension and unresolved issues, but I was determined to mend those relationships. It took time, patience, and a lot of tough conversations, but we made progress. Jane and I decided to take a trip to visit her family. Her parents were warm and welcoming, and it was clear how much they loved her. Seeing the strong bond she had with them made me want to strengthen my own family ties. Jane's family became an extended part of our support system, and our relationship grew deeper because of it. Jane and I started talking about starting a family. The idea was both exciting and terrifying. We had been through so much, and the thought of bringing a child into the world was daunting. But we were ready for the next step. We began making preparations, discussing names, and dreaming about the future. It was a time of hope and anticipation, a light at the end of a long, dark tunnel. We knew there would be challenges, but we were ready to face them together. Just as things were starting to look up, a financial crisis hit my startup. The market took a nosedive, and we lost several key investors. It was a gut punch. I spent sleepless nights trying to figure out how to keep the business afloat. Jane was a rock. She stayed up with me, brainstorming solutions, working through spreadsheets, and providing emotional support. We had some tough conversations about our future, our finances, and our dreams. Despite the stress, our bond grew even stronger. I had to make some difficult decisions to keep the startup alive, including letting go of a few employees. It was heartbreaking, but necessary. We tightened our belts, streamlined operations, and slowly, we started to recover. It was a brutal reminder of the fragility of success and the constant need for adaptability. In the midst of the financial chaos, I experienced a health scare. One morning, I woke up with severe chest pain and dizziness. Jane rushed me to the hospital, where they ran a battery of tests. The diagnosis was a severe anxiety attack, compounded by stress and exhaustion. The scare was a wake-up call. I realized I had been neglecting my health, pushing myself too hard, and not taking care of my mental and physical well-being. Jane was terrified, and seeing her fear broke my heart. I knew I had to make changes. I started prioritizing self-care, incorporating regular exercise, meditation, and proper nutrition into my routine. I cut back on work hours and made time for relaxation and hobbies. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. My health improved, and I felt more balanced and in control. During this tumultuous time, Jane's parents faced their own crisis. Her father had a heart attack, and her mother struggled to cope. Jane and I stepped in to help, spending weekends with her parents, cooking, cleaning, and providing emotional support. The experience brought Jane and me even closer to her family. I saw a new side of Jane, strong, compassionate, and unwavering. Her parents' gratitude was overwhelming, and I felt a deep sense of belonging. It reinforced my commitment to family, to being there for the people I love, no matter what. Jane and I decided to get married. It wasn't a grand affair, just an intimate ceremony with close friends and family. We exchanged vows in a beautiful garden, surrounded by love and support. It was a perfect day, a testament to our resilience and love. After the wedding, I took a sabbatical from work to focus on personal growth and health. Jane's promotion allowed us some financial flexibility, and she supported my decision wholeheartedly. I spent the time hiking, writing, and reconnecting with myself. The sabbatical gave me a new perspective on life. I realized that while my career was important, it wasn't everything. I wanted to focus on what truly mattered: my health, my relationships, and my passions. I started volunteering at a local tech school, mentoring students, and sharing my journey. It was incredibly fulfilling.